The morning sun rose over the small town's shooting range, casting long shadows across the dusty grounds. It was a place where local enthusiasts and professionals alike came to practice their aim, test new firearms, and sometimes, just to show off. On this particular day, the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. A local champion, famed for his unbeatable record, was present, and many shooters had gathered to witness his demonstration. The crowd was filled with men and women clad in tactical gear, their confident demeanor marking them as seasoned shooters. Among them, however, stood a simple woman, quiet, unassuming, and easily overlooked. Her name was Elena. She had no flashy gear, no expensive firearm case, and her clothes were plain, just a faded denim jacket over a white shirt and jeans that had seen better days. While the others carried rifles polished to perfection and pistols with custom grips, Elena carried an old revolver in a worn leather holster. Some people glanced at her and smirked, their eyes saying what their lips didn't dare: she doesn't belong here. Elena, however, didn't seem to notice, or maybe she simply didn't care. She walked to the registration table and quietly signed in. The man behind the desk raised an eyebrow, his eyes lingering on the old revolver at her side. "First time here?" he asked, his tone polite but doubtful. "First time at this range," she replied softly. "But I've shot before." Her voice was calm, almost soothing, but the man's skeptical glance didn't fade. "All right, ma'am. Just remember, safety first. Targets are set up downrange." Elena nodded and walked toward the shooting lanes. Around her, groups of men were boasting about their recent scores, swapping stories about long-distance shots and high-caliber rifles. A few laughed when they saw her take lane 12, the one directly next to the champions. "Hey, lady, that lane's cursed," one of them joked. "No one's managed to score decently there all morning. Must be bad luck." She offered a faint smile. "I don't believe in bad luck." The champion himself, a tall man with an expensive custom rifle, gave her a quick glance. He didn't say a word, but the smirk on his face was enough. His reputation was legendary, he had broken records across the state, and today he was expected to showcase his skill once again. To him, Elena was just another beginner who'd be lucky to hit the target at all. As the shooting session began, the crack of rifles echoed through the air. Bullets pierced targets with precision, and the champion's name was called out repeatedly as he scored near-perfect shots. Elena waited patiently, her revolver resting at her side. When it was finally her turn, she stepped up to the line, feet firmly planted, shoulders relaxed. One of the men behind her whispered, "She's going to miss every shot with that antique." Laughter followed. Elena ignored them. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes for a moment, letting the noise of the range fade. When she opened them, her gaze was steady. She raised the revolver, her movements fluid, almost graceful. The weight of the weapon felt familiar in her hands, like an old friend. She lined up her shot, her finger brushing the trigger with the lightest of touches. The shot rang out, cutting through the chatter and laughter. A moment later, a stunned silence fell over the crowd. The bullet had hit dead center, the bullseye. But more than that, it had shattered the previous distance record for that range, a record that the champion himself had set just a month ago. The range officer stared at the target, his jaw dropping. That's impossible," he muttered. He checked the monitors again, thinking there must be some mistake. But there wasn't. Elena's shot had been perfect. The crowd erupted with murmurs. Some gasped, some shook their heads in disbelief. The champion's smirk disappeared, replaced by a hard, calculating stare. He hadn't expected anyone, least of all this simple woman, to outshoot him. "Beginner's luck," someone said loudly, trying to laugh it off. But when Elena calmly reloaded her revolver and prepared for another shot, there was no trace of luck in her steady hands. She fired again. Another bullseye. Then another. Each shot was faster, smoother, more precise than the last. By the fourth shot, the range had gone completely quiet. Everyone was watching her now. The woman who had been ignored just moments ago was commanding the entire crowd's attention without saying a single word. The champion finally stepped closer, his pride clearly wounded. Not bad, he said, his voice tight. But hitting a few bullseyes doesn't make you a champion. How about a little challenge? Elena turned to look at him, her expression calm. What kind of challenge? 5 shots, timed, at the longest target distance. Winner takes the title for the day. His tone was confident, but there was a trace of unease in his eyes. Elena simply nodded. All right. The crowd buzzed with excitement. No one had ever challenged the champion like this, at least not successfully. Targets were reset at the farthest lane, almost twice the usual distance. The champion went first. His performance was impressive as always, each shot near perfect, though not all were dead center. The audience cheered as he finished, convinced his score would stand. Then it was Elena's turn. She stepped up, her old revolver in hand. There was no fanfare, no dramatic gestures. Just a woman and her weapon. The timer started. She didn't rush. Instead, she moved with a deliberate calm, firing each shot with surgical precision. When the final shot rang out, the range fell silent again. The officer checked the results, his eyes wide. All 5 of her shots were dead center, every single one. Not just beating the champion's record, but setting a new standard entirely. The crowd erupted into cheers and applause. Some stared at her in awe, others simply shook their heads in disbelief. The champion stood frozen, his pride crushed. For years, he had dominated this range, and now a simple woman with an old revolver had dethroned him in a matter of minutes. Elena holstered her revolver and quietly stepped back, her face showing no sign of triumph. She hadn't come for fame or recognition, she just loved shooting. As the range officer approached to congratulate her, she smiled politely, nodding at the stunned crowd. For the first time all day, no one dared underestimate her. The crowd around the shooting range had grown restless. After the woman's first shot shattered the previous champion's record, the atmosphere changed from dismissive whispers to stunned silence. Those who had laughed at her plain clothes and unassuming demeanor were now leaning in, eyes wide, as if they couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. The target downrange bore a single, clean hole exactly at the center, a shot so precise it seemed almost unreal. The reigning champion, a tall man with a smug grin now replaced by a look of disbelief, stepped forward as if to confirm for himself that there wasn't some trick involved. When he saw that the shot was legitimate, his expression darkened. The woman, however, remained calm. She didn't even look at the crowd or the champion. She simply reloaded her rifle with slow, measured movements, her hands steady and confident. She wasn't there to prove anything to anyone, at least, that's what it looked like, but the fire in her eyes said otherwise. The range official, a gray-haired man who had been running competitions for years, cleared his throat and called out the score, his voice cracking with excitement. Perfect bullseye. That's a new record shot, folks. A wave of murmurs and exclamations rippled through the onlookers. Who is she? Someone whispered. I've never seen her before, another replied. Even the veteran shooters, men and women who had spent years honing their skills, couldn't hide their admiration. A few of them moved closer, hoping to get a better look at this quiet woman who had just outperformed them all. The champion, whose name was Rick, felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He wasn't used to being upstaged, especially not by someone he had dismissed so quickly. He stepped forward, forcing a grin. Beginner's luck, he muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. Let's see if she can do it again. He motioned for the next round to start, confident that she couldn't replicate the shot. The woman, whose name no one yet knew, glanced at him but said nothing. She raised her rifle again, her posture flawless, every movement deliberate. The world seemed to quiet around her as she focused. Her breathing slowed, her finger rested lightly on the trigger, and for a brief moment, time seemed to stand still. Then came the sharp crack of the rifle. Another perfect bullseye. This time, the crowd erupted. Even the other competitors began clapping, unable to deny the brilliance of her performance. Rick's jaw tightened as he looked at the target through his scope. No way, he muttered. He had trained for years, won countless competitions, and held the record for the past 3 seasons. Now, this woman had matched and then surpassed him as if it were nothing. The range official shook his head in disbelief. 2 consecutive perfect shots. I've never seen anything like it, he said, his voice trembling with awe. He turned toward the woman. Ma'am, would you mind telling us your name? She lowered her rifle, offering a faint, polite smile. Anna, she said simply. Her voice was soft but carried enough strength to silence the crowd. Anna, the official repeated, as though memorizing it. Have you competed before? She shook her head. No. This is my first time at a range like this. That only added fuel to the fire of curiosity. How could someone with no prior competition experience achieve something so incredible? Rick stepped closer, trying to regain control of the situation. All right, Anna, he said with a smirk that didn't quite reach his eyes. How about we make this interesting? You and me, head to head. 3 shots. Winner takes the title. The crowd cheered at the prospect of a showdown. Anna didn't look particularly interested in proving herself further, but something in Rick's tone, maybe his arrogance, seemed to compel her to accept. She nodded once. Fine. The official set up a fresh set of targets, and the tension in the air was palpable. Everyone gathered around, holding their breath as the duel began. Rick went first, his shots quick but precise. He hit near the center all 3 times, though not perfectly. The crowd clapped politely, knowing it was a solid performance. He turned to Anna with a challenging grin. Your turn. Anna took her place without hesitation. Her stance was graceful, almost effortless, and when she fired her first shot, it was another perfect bullseye. The second shot followed, just as flawless. By the time she lined up her third, the crowd was dead silent, watching as if witnessing something historic. She squeezed the trigger, and the bullet struck the exact same spot as the previous 3 perfect shots, all stacked on top of each other in the center. The range erupted in cheers. People were shouting her name now, clapping and cheering louder than they ever had for Rick. The champion's face turned pale as he realized he had been thoroughly beaten. Anna simply stepped back, unloading her rifle and setting it down with calm precision. She didn't raise her arms in victory or bask in the applause, she just smiled faintly, as though she had done nothing extraordinary. The official approached her, shaking his head in amazement. Anna, that was incredible. You've set a new record and beaten our champion. How long have you been shooting? Anna hesitated for a moment before answering. Since I was a kid, she said quietly. My father taught me. We used to practice every weekend, out on the farm. The simplicity of her answer only made her seem more impressive. She wasn't a professional, she wasn't sponsored, and she didn't have expensive gear, just skill, pure and undeniable. Rick tried to salvage some dignity by offering a handshake, though his pride was clearly wounded. Good shooting, he said stiffly. Anna shook his hand, but there was no malice in her expression. Thank you. As the crowd continued to buzz with excitement, some of the range officials began discussing whether she should compete at the national level. They asked for her contact information, hinting at the possibility of sponsorships and invitations to major competitions. Anna seemed unsure. I don't know, she admitted. I just came here for fun. But it was clear to everyone watching that this was just the beginning of something bigger. Her natural talent couldn't be ignored. Before the day ended, several people approached her, offering advice, congratulations, and even opportunities to train with professional marksmen. Anna accepted their words graciously but stayed humble, never once boasting about her victory. Rick, on the other hand, left the range with his pride bruised, though perhaps with a newfound respect for the quiet woman who had bested him. The story of her incredible shots spread quickly, and by the time Anna packed up her rifle and left, people were already calling her the record breaker, a title she hadn't asked for but had undeniably earned. Would you like me to write part 3 in 1000 words, where Anna gets invited to a national championship and surprises everyone again?